I'm Marie. Sitting in my car outside my mother's house, I'm still reeling from what happened at dinner. The memory of my mother's cold dismissal of my daughter Lily's heartfelt drawing is like a fresh wound. Lily, with her big, innocent eyes and a heart full of love, had spent weeks creating that picture of a grandmother she'd always hoped for. And my mother, in one cruel sentence, crushed her spirit. It all started a few weeks ago. Lily, who's 6, had been sneaky about her drawing. Every night after dinner, she'd work on it in secret, hiding it under her pillow whenever she heard my footsteps. The rustling of paper gave her away, but I never said a word. I watched her, knowing how much it meant to her. The drawing was of 4 figures: a tall one, a teenager-sized one, a small child, and a figure standing in the doorway of a house with yellow smoke curling from the chimney. In her careful, deliberate handwriting, she labeled the figure in the doorway Grandma. She was learning to spell the word, and it was clear how much thought and effort she'd put into it. That Saturday morning, the drawing was wrapped in pink tissue paper on the kitchen counter. Lily had used almost the entire roll of tape, making sure it was perfectly sealed. I was making coffee when my son Jake, who's 15, appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, looking a bit out of place in his socks. He said he needed to tell me something before we went to my mother's. He'd found some photos a month ago while helping my mother clean out the closet in her upstairs hallway. She'd strained her shoulder and couldn't reach the top shelf. While moving boxes, an old shoebox with a lid that didn't quite stay shut came open. Inside were dozens of loose photographs, most ordinary, but one stood out. It was a picture of a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing in front of a shabby house on a dirt lot. The girl's coat was too small, and she had a steady, flat expression, as if she'd learned not to expect much from the world. On the back of the photo was an address in a small town and a year from long ago. My mother, who's always been so proper and particular, had grown up in that kind of poverty. It was a shock to me. I'd always known she was strict and critical, but I'd never imagined the reason behind it. Jake said he almost didn't tell me, but he thought I needed to know before we went to my mother's. He was right. It made me see her in a whole new light. We decided to go to my mother's for dinner. Lily was so excited, clutching her drawing and asking if she could give it to her grandma as soon as we got there. I told her to wait until after dinner, to give her grandma time to settle. Jake drove us there, and as we drove, Lily chattered away about her week at school. She'd learned a new word, magnificent, and used it several times. Jake was quiet, lost in his thoughts. When we arrived at my mother's house, it was as immaculate as ever. The front walk was edged with precision, the welcome mat was new, and the brass knocker shone. My mother answered the door, wearing a fancy blouse and her hair done up. She looked at Lily first, then Jake, then me, in a way that made it clear she wasn't just happy to see us. Dinner started off normally. Lily talked about her week with enthusiasm, and Jake ate quietly. But then, my mother started her usual critiques. She asked Jake about his plans after high school, hinting that he should aim for a 4-year college because I hadn't gone to one and it had limited my options. She also commented on Lily's school, saying the arts focus wasn't good enough for a more foundational curriculum. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel the tension rising. Lily, being so perceptive, could sense it too. She pushed back her chair and disappeared into the entryway. I knew where she was going to get her drawing. When she came back, she walked up to my mother with the pink tissue bundle in her arms. "I made it for you," she said, her voice full of pride. "It took me a really long time." My mother looked at the tissue paper, then carefully pulled at the tape and folded it back. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother looked at the drawing for a few seconds, then picked it up and set it aside. "Children from poverty don't call me Grandma," she said, in that cold, matter-of-fact tone. Lily's lower lip trembled, and she looked at me with those big, hurt eyes. I was already halfway out of my chair before I even realized it. Jake stood up too. He looked at my mother and said, "I saw the photos." My mother's face went pale. It was as if all the carefully constructed walls she'd built around herself came crashing down in an instant. I stood up and walked over to the table. I picked up the drawing, the way Lily had carried it with so much care. I looked at my mother and said, "You've spent your whole life being ashamed of where you came from, and now you're teaching my daughter to be ashamed of where she is. That ends tonight." We left the house, Lily falling asleep in the car on the way home. Jake and I talked about what had happened. He said he almost told me not to go, but he thought I needed to see it for myself. I knew he was right. That night, I decided to go back to my mother's. I couldn't leave things the way they were. I needed to have an honest conversation with her. When I got there, she was still dressed, but there was something different about her. Her hair was a bit messy, and she was holding an old shoebox. She said she thought Lily might like to know where she came from. She opened the box and showed me the photograph. It was even more real in person than I'd imagined. My mother started to explain. She said it wasn't shame that made her the way she was, but fear. Fear that if she looked back at her past, it would undo everything she'd built. Lily came downstairs and saw the photograph. She asked, "Who is that?" My mother said, "That's me, when I was almost your age." Lily looked at the photo for a long time and said, "She looks sad." My mother said she was, for a long time, but then she got better. It was a simple answer, but it felt like a huge step. My mother and I were at the beginning of a new chapter. We weren't at the end of our problems, but we were starting to be more honest with each other. In the weeks that followed, life went on. Lily continued to check on her drawing, which I'd put on the refrigerator. One day, she added a new figure to the drawing, a small one at the edge of the paper. When I asked who it was, she said, "I don't know yet. Maybe." Jake made breakfast one morning, and we sat at the table, talking and laughing. It was a simple moment, but it felt like the most important thing in the world. One Saturday, Lily asked if Grandma was going to call. I told her I didn't know, but I thought she was starting to figure things out. Lily nodded, showing a kind of patience beyond her years. A little while later, there was a knock at the door. It was my mother. She was different this time, unassuming and carrying that shoebox. She came in and sat down at the table. We started to talk, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were really connecting. Looking back, I realized that so many of us spend our lives making excuses for the people we love, trying to protect our children from their cruelty. But in doing so, we sometimes teach our children that it's okay to be treated badly. It's time to stop running alongside those who are running from their pasts and start standing up for ourselves and our children. I hope that my story can help others who might be going through similar situations. It's never too late to have an honest conversation, to open the box and face the truth. Because only then can we start to heal and build stronger, more authentic relationships.